Blog Talk Radio.
Nobody ever told you.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to Show Talk with Angela Butler. Today's interview is with John Meredith. John Meredith is the son of Mr. James Meredith, who is a renowned civil rights leader. He's known for integrating Ole Miss, as his nickname, University in Mississippi. How are you doing, James? And this is his son, by the way. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you, ma'am?
Oh, okay. Great. Great. I'm doing okay. So how have you been doing, and are you still working with Dr. Avita King?
I've been relocated to Huntsville, Alabama, and write a column for a media outlet in Alabama called AL.com, and the column appears in three papers in the state, the Huntsville paper, the Montgomery paper, and the Birmingham paper. Also do political analysis for the CBS affiliate here in Huntsville. So I'm staying busy.
Okay. All right. So I'm reading something about you. It was written by Mark MacArthur, and it was written March 29, 2015, and updated on March 29, 2015. It said, John Meredith looks at Father Frazier's maverick life and activist icon. It talks about the picture of your father, Mr. James Meredith. And it begins like this. Imagine the photograph has been part of your life for almost 50 years. Imagine it is your father, face contorted in anger and fear. Blood already seeping through a short-sleeved plaid shirt. Imagine it is your father who has been knocked to the dusty Mississippi two-lane highway by an evil redneck shotgun blast. And this first two paragraphs, was wrote by Mr. Mark Carter. Would you like to comment on that, sir?
Well, based on that interview, Mark and I have become friends, and I just think he's got a wonderful gift with words. He is just an awesome writer. His normal track, believe it or not, is actually sports, and I know he's written a book, I believe, he covered that for years and years in his early journalistic endeavors. So I think that paragraph captures both the reality on the ground that day, but also it shows Mark's skill very much. But that was a very traumatic time for me as a child, and it probably ultimately led to why I do what I do now with the government. When Dad broke the color line at Ole Miss, he did not get hurt. Granted, there were 33,000 troops and a bunch of U.S. Marshals, hundreds of them, making sure that he wasn't hurt. And there was a riot, but he was not hurt. When he took the march for voter registration rights for minorities in Mississippi, he was shot. So as a child, you weigh those two events and you think education might be important, but participating in government will get you killed. So, in my the mind of a child at the time, government and participating in it was more important, probably the most important thing that you could do. I mean, that must be, and again, child's mind, the most important right we have as a citizen is the right to vote if they'll kill you for trying to exercise it.
Oh, okay. All right. So politics is what you're involved in. And Are you still a senator? I know you have been a senator in the past.
No. Let me correct you there. At one point, my name was being bantied about, if you will, for the senatorial appointment that ultimately went to Senator Luther Strange. But no, I haven't been a senator. There was just some rumblings of my being in the run for the nomination.
Oh, okay.
I did run for city council once. Didn't quite make it, but so politically speaking, that's probably it for me. What I probably misspoke, and instead of politics should have said government. And what I mean by that is I spent a couple of decades lobbying Congress. So I've been engaged in the federal government for slightly over 20 years. And, spent a lot of time engaged in immigration and was a part of the last two real attempts at comprehensive immigration reform, actually writing language that was in the bills that were passed in Congress but ultimately never made it to the president's desk. Also wrote and managed some bills on specific immigration policies in those years that actually did become law. Also was engaged in many other laws. Some of those include the extension of daylight savings time is something we worked on, got put on an energy bill. We raised money for agricultural and horticultural research. In fact, they invited me to attend a groundbreaking ceremony in southern Mississippi years and years ago to build a building that would house some of that research. We handled clients that were interested in something related to the Violence Against Women's Act. Frankly, it has to deal with restitution issues. It's a very, very dark subject. That's why I'm being kind of evasive on that. But it was a legal matter that went through fairly quickly and easily. We did appropriations work for several different municipalities, helping them get federal funding from everything from adding lights to outdoor fields so that kids could play at night, creating ballparks and recreation areas, to landscaping streets and putting, believe it or not, cisterns on individual homes for folks that wanted to capture rainwater and use it to irrigate. So a world of things, but it allowed me the opportunity to totally understand the mechanisms of the federal government, Congress specifically, although we also did a lot of work with the federal agencies at DOL, Department of Homeland Security, of course the IRS and others. So, I know how it works. I've met and befriended several members of Congress along the way, and so I know a lot of the personalities that are there, and it's a very interesting time right now when it comes to what's going on in Washington.
Yes, sir. I have a question. What was the bill that you tried to pass concerning immigration reform?
The ones that passed had to deal with
Obama administration.
It dates back to George W. Bush's administration, and it had to do with specifically with non-agricultural, non-seasonal foreign labor. So it's the program is called the H-2B program, but it's a non-immigrant program that goes through the Judiciary Committee. And the issue was that there's a cap on it that was being hit very, very early in the fiscal year. So industries that could not apply for their workers until later in the year were always locked out because the numbers were going so quickly. So we petitioned Congress to raise the cap, but worked out a compromise where we did a look back on those workers that had used that visa and were able to enter the country without being counted on it, provided, of course, that they passed all the necessary security screens and background checks, that sort of thing. And also had, because it was a look-back program, they obviously had an employment record, so they basically had to go back to that employer that would vouch for them since they were not being counted on the cap. So there were a few extra hurdles, but the employers were able to get their workers, and particularly in areas like Cape Cod, where it's very seasonal, it saved their seasons, and a lot of the smaller resorts from, say, the Jersey Shore to Maine were able to actually function because they were able to get their workers in. And the initial law was created under George W., but it was renewed under the Obama administration.
Renewed. Okay, so this helps immigrants, sir? Is that what? That's my understanding.
Well, it's a non-immigrant program. So even though it goes through. Even though it goes through all of the same committee process, these folks are not immigrating to the United States. They're just temporary. They're coming in, they're working, they're either working in hotels for the season, they're working in landscape for the season, or roofing, or whatever industry it might that's seasonal. But the max on it is, I believe it's 6 months. So they can come, they can stay, they can work their 6 months, but then they have to leave. So it's not an immigrant program, even though it's classified that way.
Oh, okay. All right. I think, well, from what I understand from what you're saying, that's a good thing. It
passed. A lot of Americans got the benefit from the labor of the foreign workers, and the business owners were able to run at full capacity versus not. And if you're in if you've got a small 20-room resort on the Finger Lakes of New York, if you can't fill all 20 of those rooms for your short season, you're probably going to go out of business, because if you're running at 50% occupancy for 6 months and then you're closed for 6 months, you can't make ends meet that way.
Oh, okay. So I have a question. Even though you call it government, I'd like to hear more about this extension of daylight savings time. Because I'll be honest with you, I'm not completely sure I understand, but the daylight savings time here in Florida and everywhere else, when you move up an hour, that's hard. It's real hard when you go up an hour. Then you go back an hour. That's great. You know what I'm saying? Are you responsible, one of the people responsible for that, Mr. Meredith?
Not for the original bill. Daylight savings time was created, and it was already the law, and it was already happening for quite a while. What we were engaged in, and frankly, the people that I represented that were driving it were the nursery and landscape folks, people that sell the plant materials and everything in garden centers and the nurseries that supply them and the general public. Their contention was that if you extended, meaning adding weeks to daylight savings time, more people would buy more plant material and put it in their yards if they had that extra time after work. And so we were able to work with the energy companies, the petroleum industry specifically. They were working on an energy bill. At the time, global warming was a little bit more at its height. And one of the things we were able to do is part of that package of getting the daylight savings time extended was the petroleum industry is a polluter, and therefore they were putting out CO2. because plant material absorbs CO2, it was an offset to their pollution. So that was the hook for them to support us doing this. And obviously that worked out well for the both of us. People did, in fact, buy a whole lot more plant material when they had that extra time after work to pedal in their gardens.
Yes. I have family members who love to be outside and work in the yards and gardening, work with plants, and they're always somewhere buying plants and mulch and rocks and things.
Well, I have to admit I am now one of those people. And yes, I buy mulch by the cubic yard now. So I am one of the people taking advantage of it, although I have to admit at the time I lived in a condo in D.C., so cutting the yard and playing in the garden was not an immediate benefit. I had to move to Alabama to enjoy that.
Yes, sir, I understand that. So you like Huntsville, Alabama. You like it there.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, that's great. So you're the oldest son of Mr. James Meredith. You're the oldest.
Yes.
So I have, you did a lot of great things on your own, a lot of accomplishments you have on your own, I just have to wonder, even though he's your father, understand that the photo, was very probably traumatic for you and upsetting to you growing up, but what is it like being the son of Mr. James Meredith, who integrated Ole Miss, even though Mr. George Wallace and the Clay and Ku Klux Klan, all of those racist people did not want him at the university there? What is that like being his son now in today's time period?
Well, just for the record, it was actually Governor Barnett. Wallace was here in Alabama, but Dad was integrated Ole Miss, so it was Governor I just said it. Now I'm confusing myself with Wallace. Oh, okay. The Mississippi governor at the time was Ross Barnett. So it was Barnett that barred my father from entering Ole Miss. It's now it has far more of a significance. At the time he went to Ole Miss, I was only 3.
Thank you for correcting me. I apologize.
You're very welcome. If I didn't, you'd have got nasty calls. But as a child, I was only 3 then, so I really did not have any. I didn't understand the significance of it. Now, as an adult, as an adult engaged in how our federal government works, it's more of a case study, and you can see the futility, if you will, of what Governor Barnett was trying to do. Once the court spoke, everything else was futile. He was making a statement to his electorate, but in reality, he knew that he had no other choice. And while I haven't actually listened to the tapes, there are tapes of President Kennedy and Governor Barnett attempting to work out a compromise. So he knew that he being Governor Barnett knew that he wasn't going to be able to keep Dad out of the school after the courts had spoken.
So I have a question. Help me understand my history, because I know it would not be possible without you in current day times and in the past, and Mr. James Meredith, for me to have the opportunities that I have now to go to different universities, especially here in the South. But my understanding is Brown versus Ford of Topeka. Did that have anything to do with Mr. James Meredith integrating Ole Miss as American citizen?
Ultimately, it did. I mean, it laid the foundation for blacks to go to public schools. And, of course, the University of Mississippi was and still is a public school. The reason there's a delay of, 8 years is because of who was sitting in the White House. If you will notice, the timeline actually begins right after President Kennedy is inaugurated. And one of the reasons that Dad chose to make his move with Mr. Kennedy as president wasn't necessarily because he thought Mr. Kennedy would back him up. It was because of what appeared in the Democratic platform for the first time. And that I don't specifically know what that language is, but Dad has told me that that is what triggered it. That addition to the Democratic Party platform at the convention that nominated President Kennedy was the trigger point for him deciding after President Kennedy won and was inaugurated to make his application to the University of Mississippi.
Right. President Kennedy is given a lot of credit for the civil rights bills that he didn't get to sign before he died, is my understanding of history. But he's given a lot of credit for that. But Mr. Meredith, what I understand is he didn't believe that he was really going to help him, Mr. Kennedy, President Kennedy. I mean, could you explain a little bit of that?
Well, it wouldn't have helped Dad because, okay, you mean people following my father?
Yes, sir. Well, how?
Okay.
I mean, yes, sir.
Well, you're right in that Kennedy wasn't there to sign the Civil Rights Act of '64 anyway, because he was assassinated. But it was his stand against racism, particularly highlighted by sending the 33,000 troops to ensure that my father was registered, and then sending hundreds of marshals to ensure that his safety after he was registered. So President Kennedy certainly, it was the Civil Rights Act and all of the stuff Johnson signed when he became president was all predicated on Mr. Kennedy's stance. So while Kennedy never actually signed it, it was his actions that Johnson seized upon to rally the nation. That was Kennedy that did it. If Kennedy doesn't do what he did with my father and say had a heart attack and died in office, if he had a heart attack and died in office, Johnson wouldn't have done that. There wouldn't have been any incentive for him to do that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So I'm just clarifying it, making sure I understood what you were saying, because I'm related to you, right? So I kind of, get a different point of view of things. And to me, my understanding is not just history books, but for my grandmother, Baby Ruth, is that your father, Mr. Kennedy was really behind him, and he's a great man, and I'm proud to be related. But I'm just saying, I was making sure I understood that because President Kennedy was really talked about when I was coming up. Because I was born in 1970. So I was just making sure I understood that. So, grandma's passed, though.
Well, obviously the president was, quote, behind him because he sent the troops. But, he sent the troops because of Democratic Party policy. Without the platform being in the party's, if it wasn't a part of what the party had wanted to accomplish, then he wouldn't have sent the troops. Yes, there was Brown versus Board of Education, but that was being essentially applied more at the public school level, not the university level. There was pretty much a clear distinction between first grade and 12th grade, and black people being able to go to public and black people being able to go to a college of their choice. and again, I don't know the specific language in the platform, but essentially the Democratic Party, in adding this to their platform, it was the outreach to the black community, basically saying, we are going to ensure that you get the rights that you're supposed to have. So that's why Dad, after President Kennedy was elected, is because now that president has a mandate from his party to extend Board of Education to the university level, because now you're talking about all the rights that everybody enjoys. And everybody enjoys, and I say everybody now, at the time, it was what white people enjoyed. White people could go to any school they wanted to go to. Black people couldn't. But the law said that black people were supposed to be able to. The Democratic Party put that language in their platform that said, we're going to make sure that you're able to do all this stuff. So if a Republican had won the presidency, that probably doesn't apply to Ole Miss.
Okay.
But the Democrat, with this platform in their party, became president. So that's why he applied. But without the platform, Kennedy may not have sent the troops.
Okay. So I have a question.
Kennedy didn't necessarily say, oh, James Meredith wants to go to Ole Miss. I got his back. Let's send the troops. No, Kennedy said, our policy says that we're going to support black people exercising their rights. Here's a governor in Mississippi who's denying this man his right. So Kennedy said, I need to try to ensure this man's rights. Without that platform, without the Democratic Party making it a point, Kennedy could have just as easily not done anything.
Okay, all right. So, since you're in Alabama, if you don't want to answer this, because it is about politics, if you don't want to, I want to understand. When you watch the news, be it MSNBC, CNN, and all those 24-hour stations, it shows that Mr. Trump on Twitter and different outlets was in favor of Mr. Roy Moore.
Yes.
What is your opinion about that? Do you not want to comment, sir?
Well, he was for Luther Strange before he was for Roy Moore. I don't necessarily think much of his endorsement. I think at that time he was grasping for straws and got advice from whoever he listens to, and they picked two of the worst candidates that the state had to offer. In terms of Roy Moore as a candidate, period, I thought he was a terrible candidate, and so did at least 22,000 other Republican voters, because they bothered to go to the poll, they bothered to cast a vote for Senate, but they didn't vote for Judge Moore. They wrote in at the advice of U.S. Senator, Republican U.S. Senator from Alabama, Richard Shelby's advice. Shelby did not endorse Roy Moore. Shelby actually instructed people of conscience to write in another Republican's name and not vote for Moore, and 22,000 people listened to him. Ultimately, the difference in the vote between Doug Jones and Roy Moore was roughly 22,000 votes.
Okay.
Republicans in the state of Alabama basically elected Doug Jones.
Doug Jones, yes, Mr. Jones.
So while there are a whole lot of hard, I suppose, Trump-loving Republicans in Alabama, at least 22,000 Republicans in Alabama voted their conscience and not their party.
Oh, voted with their conscience. What is your opinion? I mean, you're named as one of the most influential of top 100 Republicans here in the United States of America, Black Republicans. So What is your opinion? What is your opinion about Mr. President Trump's administration and the job that he's doing?
Well, I don't support him. Lying to me is a very bad quality, and I don't particularly care to be lied to. And he told some lies on the campaign trail that just, did his candidacy in for me. And, of course, as president, he's continued that trait. So I don't necessarily appreciate Mr. Trump, but certainly respect the office of presidency. So I certainly hope his administration works out. His administration working out means America works out. So I have to root for America, so I hope he does well.
Yes, sir. All right, thank you. Thank you for that. That was, okay. So you have a firm. Am I correct? You still have your firm, Mr. Marriages?
Yes, but it really doesn't do much active lobbying anymore, some corporate training, that sort of thing. Primarily now I'm doing the journalism, both print and television. But, of course, it's all, the television is certainly politically related, as most of it is coverage of elections. The column, on the other hand, has a certain political lean to it, but not every column is political in nature. Probably 85-90% are, but sometimes other issues of the day take precedence over anything that might be happening politically.
Yes, sir, I understand that. So today, right now, where is, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not. That's your decision, Mr. Meredith. But where do you stand with politics? As everything is right now, in your own opinion, just as an American citizen, a voter. This is an everyday citizen, not as Mr. John Meredith, but as an everyday citizen. Where do you stand with things with immigration now? In your opinion, if you had a choice to vote, what would you vote for in immigration? If you could vote,
well,
if there was a vote.
Immigration is certainly an issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, it's needed to be addressed since I was working on the issues at this point, probably 10 years ago. But that being said, certainly the DACA kids need to have a path to citizenship. No one is going to write a ticket or hold responsible the minor child in a car when their parent is speeding. So these kids should not be held accountable for what their parents did. The parents have already been punished, so why are we punishing the kids? And not only that, the big thing about immigration just in general, when you look at undocumented workers, the people, the day laborers, the people that are, picking agricultural products, and a lot of cases roofing and other areas, construction, that sort of thing. They pay taxes. Taxes are taken out of their checks, and they're dumped into the Social Security fund just like everybody else's Social Security contributions. And they will never have access to that money, never, because they're not entitled to it. So that money sits in the Social Security fund, and because it's underfunded, the money is being distributed to American citizens as entitlements, and it's one of the things that politicians don't want to talk about. But part of the reason Social Security is actually viable right now is because of all the undocumented money that's floating around in it. So definitely something has to be addressed. Well, if I'm working for a company illegally and I'm giving them false papers, they're going to cut me a check every 2 weeks just like everybody else because they don't know they've got false papers. So when that company does their payroll, Social Security tax is taken out, and it's sent to whatever fake paperwork that worker gave the employer. So the employer's doing the right thing. They're taking out the money like they're supposed to. They're sending it to the government like they're supposed to. But that fake Social Security number isn't associated with someone. So ultimately, it's in the system, and it's never going to go to someone because that number isn't linked to someone. It's a fake document. So because it's being paid into the normal Social Security cycles, that money is being paid out to U.S. citizens as entitlement. The problem is when that fake document, when that worker, as far as the Social Security system is concerned, that Social Security number is never going to be presented for retirement entitlements. So that worker is paying into Social Security and is never going to draw out of Social Security because they're not entitled to it, and they're not going to be stupid enough to apply for it, because if they apply for it, they're definitely going to jail.
Okay, that reminds me of segregation a little bit, of what I know of segregation. Even though I was born in 1970, it puts me in line of some of the things that I knew that was going on, because there were Black Americans here legally who were citizens here in the United States of America. And believe it or not, I don't know if you knew this, they were paying tax. Do you believe that? And they were segregated. They were not even getting minimum wage.
They were absolutely paying taxes, and that was my father's argument for Ole Miss. He was a citizen of Mississippi. He was paying taxes. They owned a home. They owned land, so they paid taxes. They paid taxes, sales tax every time they bought something. So he's a tax-paying citizen of the state of Alabama in good standing. I mean, they were up to date and everything. So why was he being denied going to the state school that is supported by the tax dollars he paid?
Right. Why should anyone be denied, not just Mr. James Merritt, but any citizen? I mean, you're a taxpayer.
Right. And that, again, that circles back to Kennedy's motivation.
Yes, sir. Okay, I understand that. It all comes together in a political way and in a legal way, and not just a compassionate way, but it makes sense.
Exactly. The one thing we lose sight of as Americans is policy and the law does not necessarily equate to empathy and doing what's right. I may love someone tremendously, but if the law says I can't do something, I can't do it. Doesn't matter how much I might want to help you. The law says I can't.
Yes, sir. But even though something is
I mean, here's a funny thing. Here's a funny thing about the law. Here's a good example. Funny thing about the law. I don't think I got a credit card for less than 15%. I think I got one that's 26%. So I can get a loan from my credit card, go to the cash advance and take out money, and I'm paying 20-something% for that money. And that's okay. But many states still have usury laws on the books. So if I am a parent and I want to loan my child money, I can't charge them more than 10% interest. So why is me as a parent or a friend limited to only 10%? While if I borrow from my credit card to loan them, I'm paying 20-something%. The law says I can't even pass on all the interest I'm paying on that cash advance to you.
Okay. All right. And 26% is way too high. That's for people with bad credit. To me, it is.
Well, that's the fun.
That's a punishment. That's not right.
But that's the funny thing about it. Think about it. Prime interest rates probably it's inched up a little. Say it's 2%. Why is it the credit card company can get their money for 2%, but the best any credit card gives you is, say, 9%? Why do I, as a consumer, have to pay 9% on money you're only paying 2% for? How come I can't get some of that 2% money? We're supposed to have a free market. Well, the Treasury comes out every so often and says what the prime interest rate is. If I have good credit, how come I can't get that rate? How come only a bank can get that rate in a free market society? Anybody should be able to get that rate.
It's only making people wealthier. It's not. It's making the credit card because those interests are too high. I'm going to be honest with you. People with 600 and above scores are not supposed to be paying that interest. Something's wrong there. I don't know exactly what's wrong with it. I know it's legal. Seems to be what they're doing. But that doesn't make it right. Just like keeping people who are paying taxes back during segregation and now doing modern daytime immigration who you say are paying taxes, which I believe that is true, which I know it to be true. It doesn't, just because the law is on the book doesn't make it fair and equal. You know what I'm saying? Those credit cards, that's too much interest, and they know it. They're getting over. About 10 years ago, that type of interest was for people to 500 score. 500 below score. Or 400. And I'm going to be honest with you, I have horrible money management skills. Horrible. And I'm at 47. I've got to get it together, you know. But, Mr. Emeritus, you know, I'm more than glad that you came on Show Talk with Angela Butler. I'm proud to have interviewed you. And, of course, I'm going to let the family hear this interview. Is there anything you'd like to say? I've only got about 3 minutes left.
No, it's been a pleasure. I know we got a little afield on a couple of issues, but, you know, when it gets fun when you drill down, and it takes time, you know, to go beyond the sound bite. So it's always nice to get to be able to go beyond the sound bite. Sound bite.
Okay, go beyond the sound bite. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully next time I'll do a better job. I think.
Oh, I think you did great. Like I said, the opportunity to drill down on issues it doesn't happen every day. So I found it interesting, and but at least for those people interested on the subjects we talked about, they're going to get more than that superficial discussion. So I like that, and hopefully your audience will too.
Thank you, Mr. James Meredith. Thank you very much, and I look forward to having you back one day. And if you decide to run for politics there in Alabama, let me know. Even though I'm not even a Florida resident, I'd like to know and interview you. And anytime you want to come back on, you have something you'd like to talk about, you're more than welcome to come at the Show Talk with Angela Butler.
Sounds great. Thank you. Have a great day.
Yes, sir. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, everyone. This has been Show Talk with Angela Butler. That was Mr. John Meredith. He is the son of James Meredith. As you listen to him, you see Mr. John Meredith has definitely did a lot of things, including he didn't make daylight saving time, but he helped with the extension of daylight saving time for horticultural fund and things like that. And, you know, he's really an influential man. He's the named the 100 top Republicans. So that was a great thing. One of the 100, named one of the country's 100 most influential black Republicans. So that's not nothing to buy me in. All right, everyone. That's a wonderful thing. Everyone, have a good day.
Hardee's Happy Hour isn't your average happy hour. From 2 to 5 p.m., double sliders are only $1.25. Call it a charbroiled hour, a double beef hour, a whole lot of melty cheese hour. Call it what you want. Happy Hour at Hardee's is a good call. Offer for a limited time and only between 2 and 5 p.m. Price and participation may vary. Tax not included.